My mother denied me $50K for life-saving surgeries while I was dying, but when I found out she gave $500K to the mistress who destroyed my husband's marriage, I cut contact and now they're begging for forgiveness as their reputation crumbles. I'm 34 years old. I'm an elementary school teacher, and honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened to me a few months ago literally made me rethink my entire life and my relationship with my family. And when I say my entire relationship with my family, I mean that I basically discovered that my parents, the people who are supposed to be there for me no matter what, chose my husband's cheating ex-wife over me when I needed them most. I know it sounds absolutely insane, and trust me, I couldn't believe it either when I started discovering the truth. But here we are. I guess I should start from the beginning so this makes any sense. My name is Sophia. I've been married to Ryan for like 4 years, and he's basically the best person I've ever met in my life. He works in construction project management, and he's one of those people who just makes you feel safe. You know? When we met, he was already divorced from his ex-wife Amanda, and the reason for the divorce was pretty clear. She cheated on him multiple times. Like it wasn't a one-night mistake or anything. It was a constant pattern of betrayal until Ryan finally had enough and left her. I never met Amanda personally while Ryan and I were dating, but I heard stories, the typical stories you hear about toxic exes, and honestly, I thought that part of his life had been completely left in the past. My parents have always been people with money. We're not millionaires or anything like that, but they have successful businesses and live very well, like frequent trips, big house, new cars, that lifestyle. I grew up with quite a few comforts, truth be told, although they were always a bit weird with money in the sense that sometimes they were super generous and other times super stingy for no apparent reason. My younger sister and I always noticed it but never gave it much importance. It was just their way of being. When Ryan and I got married, my parents seemed happy, or at least that's what I thought. They made occasional comments about his previous divorce, but nothing that seemed like a red flag to me at the time. Everything started going to hell about a year and a half ago, when I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. I'm not going to go into all the medical details because honestly, they're complicated and boring as hell. But basically, I needed surgeries, multiple procedures, super expensive medications, and I had to take unpaid leave from my job as a teacher because physically I couldn't be standing in front of a classroom of 8-year-olds for 6 hours a day. Ryan's health insurance covered some things, but definitely not everything, and the medical bills started piling up in a way we had never experienced before. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in medical debt that just kept growing every month. Ryan was doing everything possible, working overtime, taking on additional projects on weekends. But the truth is, it wasn't enough to cover the medical bills, plus our regular expenses, plus the fact that I wasn't generating any income. It was a horrible time. Not just because of the physical pain and stress of being constantly sick, but also because of the financial pressure that was destroying our finances and honestly affecting our relationship because we were both exhausted and scared all the time. I felt terrible. Literally spent my time crying because I felt like a burden, like I was ruining our financial life just by being sick. And Ryan tried to be strong, but I could see he was also on the verge of collapse. After months of trying to handle it alone, I finally decided to swallow my pride and ask my parents for help. And this was super hard for me because I've never been one of those people who asks for money. I've always been independent since I graduated from college. But the situation was desperate. You know what I mean? I thought that given that my parents have money and given that this was literally a medical emergency that was ruining my life, they would understand and help us, even if it was with part of the bills or maybe with a loan we could pay them back eventually. The conversation with my parents was weird from the beginning. I called them and explained the whole situation. The surgeries, the bills, the fact that I couldn't work, everything. And my dad's response was something like, "Oh, honey, things are a bit difficult for us right now too. The businesses aren't doing as well as before. We have a lot of expenses. We really can't commit to something like that." And I was like, what? Because literally the week before they had been posting photos on Facebook of their new car, a BMW or something, but I tried not to judge because, well, maybe it was true they had cash flow problems or something. They ended up giving me $500. Literally, $500, when my medical bills added up to more than $50,000. It was humiliating, truth be told, and it hurt, in a way I can't even explain. But I tried to be grateful and move forward. So basically, I had to get 2 jobs while I was recovering from surgeries to be able to help cover expenses. I started tutoring in the afternoons even though my doctor had told me I needed to rest, And I also started doing freelance editing work online during nights and weekends. I was destroying my body. Literally every day I woke up in more pain. But what other option did I have? The bills weren't going to disappear on their own, and obviously I couldn't count on my parents for anything more than crumbs. The months passed and things were still super difficult, but at least we were making some progress with the debts, paying what we could when we could. My parents continued their normal life, posting about their vacations and their outings to expensive restaurants, and I tried not to feel bitter. But honestly, it was hard not to. When I was working myself to literal exhaustion, while they were having an amazing time. My younger sister, who has always been closer to me than to them, sometimes made strange comments about how our parents were acting weird lately, but I was so busy surviving that I didn't pay much attention at the time. And then came the day that absolutely changed everything. My sister came to visit me on a Sunday, and we were sitting in my living room drinking coffee and catching up, and suddenly she casually drops, "Hey, by the way, did you know that Mom and Dad invested in Amanda's yoga studio?" And I literally froze with the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Like, what did you just say? And she immediately realized she had screwed up. Her face went pale and she started stuttering. And I told her, wait, Amanda who? And obviously I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it out loud to believe it. My sister, super uncomfortable, confirms that yes, Amanda, Ryan's ex-wife, apparently my parents were angel investors in her new yoga studio that she opened like 2 years ago. I couldn't breathe, literally felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach. I started asking my sister 1,000 questions. How much did they invest? When did this happen? How is it that she knew, and I didn't? Why hadn't anyone told me anything? My sister was super nervous and told me she had found out by accident when she overheard a phone conversation of my mom's a few months ago, and that she hadn't told me anything because she assumed I already knew and just didn't want to talk about it. She told me she didn't know exactly how much money they had invested, but that from the comments she had heard, it seemed to be a significant amount, like it wasn't a few $1,000s. I spent the next few days in a state of absolute shock. I didn't tell Ryan immediately because I needed to process the information first and find out more details before exploding, you know? I started investigating on my own, looking for Amanda's yoga studio online. And sure enough, there it was. A super fancy place in an expensive area of the city, with high-end equipment and expensive classes. In the About Us section of the website, there was a vague mention of generous investors who believed in our vision, but obviously they didn't mention specific names. I decided to confront my parents at the next family dinner we had scheduled, which coincidentally was that same Friday. I arrived at their house with Ryan, and at first everything was normal. The typical family dinner with superficial conversation about the weather and work and stuff like that. I waited until after dinner, when we were all sitting in the living room, and then I dropped the bomb. I asked them directly if they had invested money in Amanda's business, and the silence that followed was deafening, like you could hear a pin drop. My mom and dad looked at each other with that look that clearly means they're about to lie, and then my dad says, "Well, technically yes, but it's complicated, it's a business matter, an investment opportunity," and I literally exploded. I told them an investment opportunity? Really? You told me you didn't have money to help me with medical bills that were literally ruining my life. You gave me a measly $500, and it turns out you did have money to spare to invest in my husband's cheating ex-wife's business? My mom started with excuses about how Amanda is a good person who made mistakes but is trying to rebuild her life, and that the yoga studio is a legitimate business with growth potential, and that they were simply making a smart investment. My dad added that giving money for medical bills would have been literally throwing money down the drain because medical debts never end. There are always more bills. But investing in a business is different because there's return on investment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Literally, my hands were shaking with rage. I told them they were basically saying that their own daughter's health was worth less than the yoga business of a woman who has no family relationship to them, a woman who destroyed my husband with her repeated infidelities, and then my mom. And I swear this happened. My mom has the nerve to suggest that maybe I should consider taking yoga classes instead of so many medications and surgeries, that Amanda always says yoga has incredible healing properties and that it could help me with my condition. I just stared at her, literally speechless. Because how do you respond to something like that? How do you explain to your own mother that a chronic illness requiring medical intervention can't be cured with yoga and good vibes? Ryan, who until that moment had been quiet because he knew this was my confrontation, finally intervened and told my parents that what they were doing was cruel and that they obviously had their priorities completely backwards. My dad got angry and started saying that we had no right to judge how they spent their money, that it was their money and they could do whatever they wanted with it, and that I was being melodramatic and manipulative by making this drama. That was enough for me. I told them to leave my house immediately, that I didn't want to see them again until they could understand how absolutely twisted what they had done was, and that for now we were cutting contact. My parents left offended, like acting as if they were the victims in this situation, and I completely fell apart after they left. Ryan hugged me while I cried for hours, and it wasn't just tears of anger. It was tears of grief, because I felt like I was losing my parents, or maybe realizing that I never really had the relationship with them that I thought I had. My sister called me that night. She had heard from Mom about the confrontation, and she told me she completely supported me, that what our parents did was unforgivable. A few days later, I received a text message from Amanda, and when I saw her name on my phone, I almost threw my cell phone from the shock because why the hell? Was she contacting me? The message was super fake and condescending. Something like, "Hi, Sophia. I heard about your situation with your parents. I'm so sorry you're going through difficult times. If you need anything, I'm here. And by the way, I'd love to offer you free yoga classes at my studio. It could really help you." I didn't respond. Obviously, because what was I going to say? Thanks for destroying my relationship with my parents while you take advantage of their money? The following weeks were an absolute emotional roller coaster. My aunt, my mom's sister, called me because apparently my parents had been talking to the whole family about how I was an ungrateful daughter who had kicked them out of my house for nothing. My aunt wanted to hear my version of the story, and when I told her, she was silent for a moment and then said something that froze my blood. She said that now many things made sense, that in recent years she had noticed that my parents talked about Amanda constantly, that they mentioned her in family conversations as if she were part of the family, and that she had even once seen my mom and Amanda having lunch together at a restaurant but assumed it was something casual. My aunt started investigating on her own, talking to other relatives and family friends, and what she discovered was absolutely devastating. It turns out my parents had spent vacations with Amanda, like complete trips where she accompanied them. They had celebrated holidays together, and basically they had adopted her as some kind of substitute daughter. And all this while I was struggling with my illness, working 2 jobs, and begging for help. My aunt told me that at a family gathering like a year ago, which I couldn't go to because I was in the hospital recovering from surgery, my parents spent the whole evening showing photos of Amanda and her yoga studio, talking about how proud they were of her success. The situation got worse when my parents and Amanda showed up, unannounced at my school where I work. It was super awkward because they arrived during my lunch hour, and security staff called me to ask if they could come in, and I told them absolutely not, that I didn't want to see them. My parents were out there with Amanda, literally the 3 of them together as if they were a happy family, trying to convince security to let me talk to them. The guard was incredible and didn't let them through, and eventually they left, but the whole experience left me shaking and anxious for the rest of the day. And then something happened that honestly scared me. One night, Ryan and I were at home watching TV when our security alarm started going off, indicating that someone had tried to use an old code to enter. We checked the security cameras, and it was Amanda. Literally, Amanda was at our door trying to enter our house. It turns out my parents had given her an old security code they thought still worked, a code we had changed months ago for unrelated reasons. We called the police, showed them the video, and filed a report, but Amanda had already left by the time the officers arrived. My sister, who at this point was as fed up as I was with the whole situation, decided to do her own financial investigation. She's an accountant, so she has access to certain resources and knows tricks to find information, and what she discovered was absolutely shocking. Apparently, in the last 3 years, my parents had invested almost $500,000 in Amanda's ventures, not just the yoga studio, but also other failed projects she had before, and they had even been paying part of her mortgage for a while. $500,000. Let me repeat that. $500,000 for a woman who was nothing to them while their own daughter was literally working herself to illness to pay medical bills. Things continued escalating in increasingly disturbing ways. My parents started spreading rumors in their social circle, telling friends and extended family that I was mentally unstable, that my illness had made me paranoid and delusional, and that Amanda had had to step in to help keep the family together because I had become too erratic and aggressive. Hearing these lies from third parties was heartbreaking. like people I had known my whole life now looked at me with pity or distrust, because my own parents were destroying my reputation. One night, Ryan and I came home late after one of my medical appointments and found my parents' car parked in front of our house. They were sitting there, just waiting. And when they saw us arrive, my dad got out of the car and started walking towards us, yelling that we needed to talk, that this had gone too far, that I was being ridiculous. Ryan positioned himself between him and me and told him very firmly to leave, or we would call the police. My mom got out of the car crying, saying they just wanted to see their daughter, that I was hurting them by cutting them out of my life. We had to call the police to come and document the incident, which was humiliating and sad and just horrible. I consulted with a lawyer about the possibility of getting a restraining order, especially after the incident with Amanda trying to enter our house. The lawyer told me we could technically proceed with one, but it would be difficult to get a permanent order without more evidence of direct threats or sustained harassment. So for now, we just documented each incident and changed all our security codes, locks, and basically updated all our security measures at the house. My sister and her husband finally made the decision to cut complete contact with our parents too, after my parents tried to pressure them to help them contact me and basically use them as intermediaries. My sister called me crying, telling me she never thought we would reach this point, but she simply couldn't continue having a relationship with people who had treated their own sister that way. It was sad, but also comforting to know that at least my sister saw the situation clearly and supported me. The rumors and my parents' smear campaign continued, now saying that Ryan was manipulating me financially, that he was taking advantage of my illness to control me, and that I was in an abusive relationship but was too blind to see it. All this was so absurd it was almost comical if it weren't for the fact that it was actively affecting my life and relationships. Some people who knew us well obviously didn't believe any of that, but others, especially those who only superficially knew our situation, started asking uncomfortable questions or distancing themselves. My health got worse during all this stress, which was ironic and horrible because the stress of the situation with my parents was literally worsening the medical condition that this had all started over in the first place. My doctor finally recommended that I resign from my tutoring job because the stress and overtime hours were putting my recovery at risk, which was scary financially but necessary. Luckily, right at that moment, Ryan received a promotion at his job that came with a significant raise and better health insurance, which was like a ray of light in the middle of all this darkness. After months of individual and couples therapy, because yes, this whole situation affected us so much that we needed professional help to process it, Ryan and I finally decided we needed a fresh start. We decided to move to a different neighborhood next month, partly for security reasons, because honestly we no longer felt safe knowing that my parents knew where we lived and had shown they were willing to show up unannounced, but also because we needed physical and emotional distance from everything that had happened. Last week we had our last therapy session before the move, and my therapist asked me how I felt about everything that had happened, and the truth is, I don't have a simple answer. I'm angry, obviously, super angry in a way that will probably never completely go away. I'm sad, because I basically lost my parents. Or maybe more precisely, I realized I never had the kind of parents I thought I had. I'm confused, because I still don't fully understand how or why they chose Amanda over me. What was it that made that connection more important than their relationship with their own daughter? But also, and this is weird to admit, I'm in a way relieved, because I no longer have to keep pretending we have a functional family relationship when clearly we didn't. Ryan asked me a few days ago if I ever thought there could be reconciliation with my parents in the future. I honestly told him I don't know, that maybe if they came with a genuine apology and real understanding of what they did, and if they cut all relationship with Amanda, maybe, possibly, we could start rebuilding something. But that would require them to admit they were deeply wrong. And based on everything that's happened so far, I don't think they're capable of that level of introspection or accountability. My sister came to help us pack this weekend, and while we were putting things in boxes, she found an old photo of all of us on a family vacation like 10 years ago. Everyone smiling, hugging, looking like the perfect family. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to find signs of what was to come, but there weren't any. We just looked happy and normal. I asked my sister if she had seen signs before all this, if she had noticed that our parents had something weird with Amanda before I found out. She thought about it and said that in retrospect there were weird things, little comments here and there, but she never imagined it would reach this level of betrayal. Yesterday, I received an email from my aunt telling me that my parents asked her for my new address. Obviously, she didn't give them any information, but the fact that they're trying to find out where we're moving makes me nervous. We already gave instructions to all family members who still talk to us that under no circumstances should they give our new address, phone numbers, or any information about us to my parents or Amanda. It's sad to have to take these precautions with your own family, but here we are. Right now, almost a year after all this exploded, I'm focused on rebuilding my life in a way that makes sense to me. Ryan and I started couples therapy not because our relationship was bad, but because we wanted to make sure we processed all this trauma together and didn't let it affect us long term. We're planning the move. I'm slowly recovering from my illness with better health insurance and less work stress, and basically we're trying to create a life that's ours, without the toxicity my parents brought. Did I ever think the day would come when I would completely cut contact with my parents and need to move? To escape from them? Never. Not in a million years. But life surprises you in the most twisted ways sometimes. What hurts me most isn't even the money. Although $500,000 is an obscene amount that would have completely changed our lives during my medical crisis. What hurts me most is realizing that for my parents, a strange woman who was horrible to their son-in-law was more important, more valuable, more worthy of their love and resources than their own daughter. That's something I'm going to have to live with and process for the rest of my life, and honestly, I don't know if I'll ever fully understand it.